Antarctica. It is the most remote and inhospitable place on our planet. Before 1939, exploring it wasn't just a challenge, it was often a death sentence. Only two teams had ever reached the South Pole, and only one of them made it back to tell the tale. With temperatures plunging below minus 80 degrees Celsius and winds that could blow a man off his feet, the continent was a frozen fortress. But by the late 1930s, the world's powers began to look at this wasteland and see something else. Opportunity. Beneath the ice lay the potential for oil, minerals, and massive wealth. There was just one problem for the United States Day. We're nowhere on the map of claims to fix this. President Franklin D. Roosevelt authorized the most ambitious expedition in American history. And the centerpiece of this mission was a machine that looked like it had been ripped straight from the pages of a science fiction novel. This was the Antarctic Snow Cruiser. It was 55 feet long, 20 feet wide, and weighed a staggering 37 tons. This wasn't just a vehicle. It was a mobile laboratory, a fortress on wheels designed to sustain a crew of 5 for an entire year without ever needing to touch a base camp. It even carried its own biplane on its roof. The design was, for 1939, pure genius. It used a diesel-electric hybrid drivetrain, a concept decades ahead of its time. 2 diesel engines generated power for electric motors tucked inside the wheel hubs. This removed the need for fragile drive shafts and gearboxes that would surely snap in the cold. It also featured a revolutionary crevasse crossing system. Because the front and rear of the machine hung so far over the wheels, it could retract its legs and slide across gaps in the ice, up to 15 feet wide like a giant sled. It was supposed to be the machine that would finally conquer the South Pole for America. But there was a fatal flaw in the plan: time. While the idea had been brewing since 1937, the government didn't give the green light until the spring of 1939. That gave the engineers at Chicago's Armo Institute just 6 months to design, build, and test a machine that had no equal in human history. They worked around the clock, finishing the cruiser just weeks before it had to be on a ship in Boston. There was zero time for a proper test in the snow. Instead, the test would be a 1,000-mile drive from Chicago to the Boston docks. That drive became a national sensation, total disaster. Almost immediately, the cruiser's weaknesses were exposed. In Indiana, a simple rainstorm turned the roads into a skating rink. The unstoppable machine slid into a ditch where it sat for 3 days while crews frantically tried to dig it out. It was a humiliating start. Then came the speed or lack of it. It was supposed to hit 30 miles per hour, but with only 300 total horsepower to move 37 tons, it barely crawled. It was so slow and so wide that it caused the largest traffic jam in history at the time, backing up 70,000 cars outside of Boston. It barely made it to the ship with 2 days to spare. Despite the warning signs, the expedition set sail. In January 1940, the snow cruiser finally touched Antarctic soil and things went from bad to ugly. As the crew drove it off the ramp, the wheels hit the snow and did nothing. They just spun. It turned out that the engineers, in their rush, had used tires designed for swamp buggies. They were massive, 10-foot-tall rubber balloons, but they were perfectly smooth. On the slick Antarctic ice, they had as much grip as a pair of silk socks on a waxed floor. The crew was desperate. They tried wrapping the tires in heavy chains. They even took the spare tires and bolted them to the front wheels to double the surface area. It didn't help. The machine was too heavy, and the tires had no bite. The irony was heartbreaking. A machine built to traverse thousands of miles of polar mountain ranges couldn't even move 100 yards from the ship. After weeks of trial and error, the crew discovered one bizarre trick. Because of the way the weight was distributed, the cruiser actually had slightly better traction if they drove it in reverse. So, for a brief, surreal moment in history, the most advanced exploration machine ever built spent its days crawling backward across the ice. It managed to travel about 92 miles in a loop, but the dream of reaching the South Pole was dead. It was too slow, too underpowered, and it used too much fuel just to fight its own weight. Eventually, the team admitted defeat. They parked the cruiser and turned it into a stationary, heated hut. They covered it with timber and snow, using those advanced diesel engines to keep the cabin warm while they conducted seismographic tests from one spot. But the snow cruiser's time was running out. As World War II began to consume the globe, the U.S. government pulled the plug on the expedition. The crew packed their bags and left the legendary machine behind. Sitting alone in the middle of a white void dot, in 1946, another expedition found it. They reported that the machine was in remarkably good shape. They just had to pump up the tires. And it was ready to go, though it still couldn't move anywhere. It was found again in 1958, buried under several meters of snow, marked only by a bamboo pole sticking out of the drift. That was the last time anyone ever saw it. Where's the Antarctic Snow Cruiser today? No one knows for sure. Antarctica isn't just a block of ice. It's a moving shelf. Some experts believe the cruiser is still there, buried 30 feet deep under decades of snowfall. Others believe a more dramatic fate, that the section of the ice shelf it was parked on broke off, becoming a rogue iceberg that floated out into the Southern Ocean. If that's the case, the 37-ton Titanic of the Antarctic eventually melted out of its icy tomb and sank 10,000 feet to the bottom of the sea. The snow cruiser remains a haunting reminder of what happens when extreme optimism meets rushed engineering. It was a brilliant idea that simply ran out of time. It was designed to be a legend, and in a way, it was just not for the reasons its creators intended. It remains a ghost of the ice, a 3017 monument to a future that never quite arrived.